This video is an addendum to the introduction given in the first video. It's sort of like goes between, the first video I dealt with maps, different types of maps are available. The third video I want to deal with wills, link the wills to the maps so that we know who the families are and whether or not they were Quakers. The purpose of the addendum is just to deal with the fact that this Ford map is oriented, pointing east, and the Mayo map we've seen is also oriented in a different direction, pointing west. But we know Barbados points north. So what happens is that the text becomes rotated through 90 and read up and down instead of along. So this is going to basically straighten this out and add some extra information as well. When the Ford and the Mayo maps are georeferenced to the Google Earth map, they're turned through 90 degrees because the Ford points east instead of north, and the Mayo points west instead of north. So the text is also twisted by 90 degrees. Just to bring home this point clearly, that Friends plantations are clearly marked on this map, on which none of the forts are marked, suggests to me that whoever commissioned this map required an accounting for these plantations. The plantations are in the Spikestown, Little Bristol area, pretty close. And Heathcote's Bay is right here. The Heathcote Bay meeting became the cemetery for St. Peter's Church. It was sold to the diocese in 1846 by its owner. I don't know quite how he got to own it, but he got to own it. His surname was Hill, Hill. Besides the fact of the existence of Friends plantations in this area, you'll notice that what is not here is the Highway 1 going along the coast through Spikestown and up north. The only two roads that are shown here are the roads that actually spread out from the area of Spikestown and close by Heathcote's Bay. They go east. If you follow them, you'll see they go all the way into the Scotland district and all the way into St. Lucie. Oops. All the way into St. Lucie and St. Peter. Okay. Well, that would suggest that the Spikestown, which was a port town and serviced by ship, was also serviced by the roads that brought provisions to the port for the ships that were stopping there. What's interesting too is as you move down the coast, you'll see the same thing with the roads for Old Town and Reeds Bay. Further on, you'll see Bridgetown. There's only 3 highways coming out of it. There's no coast road on the south coast either. If you look, you'll see there's no coast road. Nothing. Nothing up to Oistins. Oistins is another port town. From Oistins, two roads emanate, going to St. Philip and Christchurch. Again, the idea is, I suspect, to bring provisions to reprovision ships in this area. The St. Thomas and St. Joseph parishes, which I showed in the first video, but rotated through 90 degrees because of the georeferencing to the Google Earth map. So for now, let's stop this one here and we'll start the next one looking at that. I wanted to look at the Ford map rotated so they could actually read from left to right instead of up and down. This is what it looks like. You can read the names a lot easier this way. But that's just how the map was made, with the north point pointing east. Mayo has the north point pointing west. So this is what Ford looks like up close in St. Joseph and St. Thomas, or at least what I reckon is the case. Here's a prospect of Bridgetown, a port town in Barbados. It's done by Samuel Coppens in 1695. You can see there are plenty of ships, very, very busy. You can see the fort, Willoughby's Fort, Needham's Point Fort, and we can zoom in and look more closely at the area of Bridgetown. And it's quite amazing to see the clear difference between the opulence of the merchants. I wouldn't say the poverty of the planters. So that's the next thing to look at when we zoom in. Here is Willoughby's Fort. Here are some ships getting careened. You've got the merchants' wharfs along here, Emperor's Wharf, Tuffield's Wharf, and other wharfs along there. Look at the houses. Really well appointed houses. Let's go up a little bit and look in the background at what's happening in the countryside behind it. First of all, the mills are not the stone mills that we see today. They look more as though they're built out of wood. You have the little houses on the plantations, but it's obvious that the merchants are the ones who are contributing to the economy more so than the planters are. and you'll see that expressed in the trade by 1848. Probably nine nine times there was nine times the tonnages going through Bridgetown. The sugar tonnages going through Bridgetown were probably 1/9 of the total tonnage, or 1/10. So the obvious way that Barbados earned its keep was by trade, not by sugar. This is Mayo, 1722. So it's 45 years after the 1675 Ford map. Roughly two generations. So you would expect things to change. The Quakers may not be, a lot of the Quakers may have reverted back to the Church of England. Things may have changed, Families may have died. Families may have produced only girl children and their names disappear. So let's look at a little bit here at this inset here. Grade. This is Codrington College here, 1722. So 1711, Christopher Codrington Jr. would have died and would have given his two plantations to the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in foreign parts. That sounds like evangelizing. So it sounds like Christopher Codrington was an evangelical Christian. And guess what? The first evangelical Christians were Quakers. So as we look through the wills, we bear that in mind. And what we'll find out is that, in fact, all three Codringtons, three generations of Codringtons, were Quakers, as was Henry Drax, who was a cousin. His will is 1680, but we'll see that a little later on. So let us zoom in a bit and see what we have here. We're going to look at before we zoom in, this is going to be Concept Bay. This is going to be the college. This is obviously the sugar works belonging to Codrington on the lower plantation, under the hill. Boiling house, curing house. And if you look close, you'll see there's a road when we zoom in that goes down into Concept Bay. That road I walked so many times with the National Trust hikes. First with Richard Goddard, and then Herman Lowe, and then in my own right as a leader. That's a really favorite track down to the sea. If you look in here, you'll see all the ships off the coast. Think about it. For Codrington to make his sugar here and get it to Bridgetown or Spikestown, that's going to be quite a feat, with roads being what they were at the time. But if he comes down here straight into the port, which is what Concept Bay was, he basically gets to ship his sugar out. It also means that all the neighboring plantations will ship through Concept Bay. So let's zoom in a little bit and see what we got here. So with this key. Now, let's look a little closer. Now we have to move this a little bit so that I can get into the right there. So we have a prospect of Codrington College. What is that? Difficult to see. A is the college Let's look a little bit closer here. Here would be here. This is the college. Let's look a little bit closer. What we see is this. It's back into the here. College looks like 210 feet in length. So what the drawing is actually saying is this college is 200 feet in length. B is the mansion house. Which is this. That's the that's the lodge, the lodge where the principal lives. Now, C is the windmill. Well, that was the windmill we saw. D is the boiling house. E is the curing house. And F is concept bay. So here's C, D, sorry, beg your pardon, C, D, E, and down here is concept bay. You can see the track that leads down to concept bay from Codrington College or Codrington Plantation. And over this track would have traveled the sugar down to the sea and out to the ships waiting offshore and then to market. It would also have been the way that plantations in St. John probably shipped their sugar overseas as well. Let's start to move around and see what happens here. Now, let's zoom out a little bit. Start to zoom out. So look at that. And we got from that in 1722 trade is pretty important, and this was another possibly port of entry and exit controlled by Codrington. Here is here is the ships all in the sea coming into Carlisle Bay, and as we move up, sorry, as we move up, sorry, yeah, there it is. As we move up along the coast, we can see the ships all along here heading for Carlisle Bay. See what else happens here now. So now we're going to come in here and see what Codrington looks like. Remember, Ford had Codrington as the names up here in St. John. But now, what has happened is, zoom in a little bit more. There you go. Over to the side. See if we can get both societies in. There it is. These are the two Codrington plantations. This is Codrington. This is the society at Willard School, and this is the society, which is Codrington College. It's called a society because both plantations now belong in 1722 to the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts. So, again, you're watching evangelical Christianity at work. Um, and as I said before, it suggests that Codrington may have been a Quaker. We'll see a bit more about these other families in the area when we start to look at the wills. We'll look at, let's see, We look at Gollop, but the Gollop will, that's an interesting will. You can see the connections, the Quaker connections are so amazing. So the Gollop family is up in the Fraser's Valley. And Gollop is a Quaker, as we will find out when we deal with the wills. He's linked to all sorts of other Quakers, including Christopher Codrington, which we'll find out. Here's let's see, Adamson's Bay. Here's Tent Bay. It's called Tent Bay way back then. The Rock Three Boys. We know that as Three Boys Rock. That is actually a parish boundary. We come up through here. That's Bath. That becomes Bath. Quinton is still named down there. Here's Consett. Here's Consett Bay and Consett Point. So for now, this is what it looks like up close. And the changes that happened between 1745, 1675 and 1722 over a 45-year period, 2 generations. So that's that. Just to show the effect of trade on Barbados. This is a view that would have been drawn in 1848 when Schomburg did his book, History of Barbados. You can see the number of ships in Carlisle Bay. This is obviously the cathedral. This would be St. Mary's Church. This is 1848. I think that was built in 1825. Here are the windmills. You can see definitely the stone mill walls, unlike the ones from 1695. And this comes out of Schomburg's book. Let me paint this back. There you go. I got from the History of Barbados by Sir Robert A. Schomburg. Here's Nelson in 1848. The little children playing around him. Broad Street going off in the distance. No traffic. Anyway, this is just to finish off the addendum and show that the rotation of the maps, the early maps, is quite different to what we are accustomed to now. So thanks for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this one.